My ex-wife told my 9-year-old they were the reason we divorced. I knew something was wrong the moment I picked up Emma from Sarah's house last Friday. My 9-year-old, who usually bounces to my car chattering about her week, barely looked up from her shoes as she climbed into the back seat. "Hey sweetheart," I said, adjusting the rearview mirror to see her face. "How was school today?" "Fine." The word came out flat, lifeless. Emma stared out the window, her small hands twisted in her lap. This wasn't typical post-divorce adjustment behavior. Emma and I had developed a solid routine over the past 8 months since the divorce was finalized. She'd spend weekdays with Sarah and weekends with me, and despite the initial bumps, she'd seemed to adapt well. But for the last 3 weeks, she'd been increasingly withdrawn during our time together. "Want to stop for ice cream?" I tried again as we pulled away from Sarah's pristine suburban driveway. "That new place with the cookie dough flavors you wanted to try?" Emma shrugged. "I guess." At Scoops and Dreams, she picked at a double scoop of birthday cake flavor, usually her absolute favorite. I watched her push the melting ice cream around the bowl, my concern growing by the minute. Talk to me. What's going on?" She looked up then, and I saw something in her dark eyes that made my chest tight. Guilt. Heavy, adult guilt that had no business being on a child's face. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you hate me?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Emma, no. Never." "Why would you even think that?" Her lower lip trembled. Because if I wasn't born, you and Mommy would still be married." The ice cream shop suddenly felt too bright, too loud. The cheerful yellow walls seemed to close in as I processed what she just said. "Who told you that, sweetheart?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mommy said, she said that you guys were happy before I came along. That I made everything complicated and expensive and that's why you left." My hands clenched into fists under the table. Sarah and I had agreed, had specifically discussed in mediation, that we would never make Emma feel responsible for our divorce. We'd both signed a parenting plan that included guidelines about protecting Emma from adult conflicts. "Emma, look at me." I kept my voice gentle despite the rage building in my chest. "That is absolutely not true. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The problems between Mommy and me had nothing to do with you." "But Mommy said." "Mommy was wrong to say that." I reached across the table and took her small hands in mine. Adults get divorced because they can't figure out how to be happy together anymore. It's never, ever because of their kids. Emma started crying then, quiet tears that broke my heart. "I thought maybe if I was really good, you'd come home." I moved around to her side of the booth and pulled her close. She felt so small against my chest, carrying a burden no child should ever bear. Over her head, I stared at the shop's cheerful motivational posters, my mind already racing. Sarah had crossed a line I never thought she'd cross. She was using our daughter as a weapon, poisoning her against me by making her believe she was unwanted, unwelcome, the cause of our family falling apart. This couldn't continue. I had to document this. I had to protect Emma. I had to fight. That night, after Emma fell asleep clutching her stuffed elephant, I called my attorney. Marcus Chen had handled my divorce, and while the process had been brutal, he'd been straight with me throughout. "David, it's almost 11, Marcus said when he picked up. "This better be important." Sarah told Emma that she's the reason we divorced. The line went quiet for a long moment. "Are you certain?" "Kids sometimes misinterpret." She said Sarah specifically told her that we were happy before Emma was born, that Emma made everything complicated and expensive. My voice was tight with controlled anger. "Marcus, she's 9 years old and she asked me if I hate her." "Jesus." I heard papers rustling in the background. Marcus was already working. "We need to document this immediately." "Did you record the conversation?" "No, I was too shocked to think clearly." I paced my kitchen, staring at Emma's artwork covering my refrigerator, crayon drawings of stick figures labeled Daddy and Emma under rainbow skies. What are my options here? Modification of custody based on emotional abuse. But David, family court moves slowly, and the burden of proof is high. We need evidence of a pattern, not just one incident. There have been other things. I thought back over the past month. Emma's been asking weird questions. Last weekend she wanted to know how much her food costs, if I have enough money to take care of her. 2 weeks ago she apologized for needing new shoes. Marcus was typing. "Document everything. Dates, exact quotes if you can remember them. Start keeping a journal of every interaction." And David? "Consider getting Emma into therapy immediately." Won't that tip Sarah off that I'm building a case? Maybe. But your daughter's mental health comes first. A therapist's assessment could actually strengthen our position if they determine Emma's being subjected to psychological manipulation. After I hung up, I sat at my laptop and started typing. Friday, October 13th, 7:30 p.m. Emma asked if I hate her. Said Sarah told her we were happy before she was born. The words looked stark and brutal on the screen. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emma seemed upset when I picked her up Sunday. "Everything okay? The audacity made my blood boil. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, typing and deleting responses. Finally, I settled on, she's fine. We had a good weekend, But Sarah wasn't done. Another text came through, she's been having nightmares lately. Maybe the back and forth between houses is too much stress. Kids need stability, There it was. Sarah was already positioning herself as the concerned parent while simultaneously suggesting I was the problem. The same woman who'd spent weeks convincing our daughter she was unwanted was now playing the role of protective mother. I screenshot both messages and saved them to a new folder labeled Documentation. Monday morning, I called Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a child psychologist my pediatrician had recommended during the initial divorce proceedings. Her earliest appointment was Thursday at 4 p.m. "I'll need to speak with Emma's mother as well," Dr. Walsh explained. "Both parents should be involved in a child's therapy." "Of course," I said, though my stomach churned. Sarah was smart, manipulative. She'd find a way to spin this, to make me look like the unstable parent dragging Emma into unnecessary therapy. But I had to try. Emma deserved a childhood free from adult guilt and manipulation. She deserved to know she was loved unconditionally, that she wasn't responsible for the failures of her parents' marriage. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was entering a war where my daughter's well-being was the battlefield. Sarah had fired the first shot by weaponizing Emma's innocence against me. Now I had to fight back without destroying the very child I was trying to protect. Tuesday morning brought another bombshell. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my office. "Mr. Patterson, I'm concerned about Emma's behavior lately. She's been asking some unusual questions during our writing time." I set down my coffee, already knowing this wasn't going to be good news. "What kind of questions?" "Yesterday we were working on personal narratives, and Emma asked if she should write about making people sad by being born. When I asked her to explain, she said her family would be happier if she wasn't around." Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was carefully professional, but I could hear the concern underneath. "Has there been additional stress at home recently?" My jaw clenched. Sarah's poison was spreading beyond our custody exchanges into Emma's school life. There have been some discussions that Emma misunderstood. I'm getting her into therapy this week. I think that's wise. I've also noticed she's been hoarding snacks from lunch. Yesterday I found 6 unopened juice boxes and 4 granola bars in her desk. When I asked about it, she said she was saving them for when Daddy runs out of food money. The room seemed to tilt sideways. She said, "What? Mr. Patterson, is there a financial situation Emma should be worried about? Because if there are resources the school can provide." "No." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma has never gone without anything she needs. This is something else entirely." After hanging up, I immediately called Marcus. His paralegal, Janet, answered on the second ring. "Marcus is in court until 3, but he said to tell you to document any school-related incidents immediately. Can you email Mrs. Rodriguez and ask her to put her observations in writing?" I spent my lunch break crafting a careful email to Mrs. Rodriguez, asking for documentation while trying not to sound like I was building a legal case. By 2 p.m., she responded with a detailed account of Emma's behavior over the past 3 weeks, including direct quotes that made my stomach turn. Asterisk, Emma mentioned that she costs too much money and asked if there were ways she could cost less so people wouldn't be mad. Asterisk. Asterisk, during math class, Emma calculated how much her school supplies cost and announced she would pay Daddy back when she gets a job. Asterisk. Asterisk, Emma has declined participating in our upcoming field trip, stating she doesn't want to make anyone spend more money on her. Asterisk. The field trip detail hit especially hard. Emma had been talking about the zoo visit for months. The fact that she declined it meant Sarah's manipulation was actively robbing her of normal childhood experiences. When I picked up Emma that afternoon, I decided to test something. "Hey sweetheart, Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned you might not want to go on a zoo field trip next week. What's that about?" Emma's shoulders hunched inward. "Field trips cost money. The permission slip said $25. $25 isn't a problem for me. You know that, right?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her shoes. "Mommy said you have to pay her lots of money every month because of me. She said it's called child support and it's why you can't afford nice things anymore." Another direct hit. I pulled over into a parking lot, needing to focus completely on this conversation. "Emma, child support is money I pay to help take care of you. It's not a punishment or something bad. It's what parents do. But Mommy said you used to have a bigger apartment before you had to pay for me." This was true, but completely twisted. I'd moved to a smaller place because I wanted to save money to buy a house with a yard for Emma. Sarah knew this. We discussed my housing plans during mediation. "I chose a smaller apartment because I'm saving up to buy us a house," I explained. "With a big backyard where we can put a swing set." Emma looked up at me with those wide, dark eyes. "Really? Really? Everything I do, every choice I make, is because I love you. Not because you're a burden." That evening, I called Dr. Walsh's office and requested an emergency session. Her receptionist squeezed us in for Wednesday at 6 p.m. "Mr. Patterson, I should warn you that if I determine a child is being emotionally abused, I'm mandated to report it to Child Protective Services." The word sent a chill down my spine. CPS involvement could complicate everything, might even backfire and make me look like the problematic parent. But Emma's well-being had to come first. "I understand. At this point, I just want my daughter to get help." As I hung up the phone, I realized there was no going back. Tomorrow's therapy session would either be the first step toward protecting Emma, or the beginning of an even messier battle. Either way, the stakes had just gotten higher. Wednesday's therapy session started well enough. Dr. Walsh's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and shelves filled with games and art supplies. Emma seemed curious rather than anxious as she explored the space. "This is a place where you can say anything you're feeling," Dr. Walsh explained to Emma. "Sometimes kids have big worries, and it helps to talk about them with someone whose job it is to listen." For the first 20 minutes, Emma colored while chatting about school, her friends, and her stuffed elephant collection. She seemed almost like her old self. Then Dr. Walsh gently steered the conversation toward family. "Emma, can you tell me about living in 2 different houses?" The change was immediate. Emma's crayon froze mid-stroke, and her shoulders tensed. "It's okay, I guess. What's the best part about Dad's house?" "We make pancakes on Saturday mornings." A small smile appeared. "Daddy lets me flip them, even though I'm not very good at it yet." "And what's the best part about Mom's house?" The smile vanished. Emma set down her crayon and folded her hands in her lap. "Mommy takes good care of me." Something in her tone made jar. Walsh leaned forward slightly. "That sounds important. How does Mommy take care of you?" "She makes sure I know the truth about things." Emma's voice became very quiet, very careful. "She says it's important that I understand how things really are." My chest tightened. Even at 9 years old, Emma had learned to speak in Sarah's coded language. What kind of truth? Dr. Walsh asked. Emma glanced at me, then back at her coloring page. Just, grown-up stuff. About money and why people make the choices they make. Can you give me an example? The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Finally, Emma spoke without looking up. Mommy explained that when people have babies they don't plan for, it changes everything. Like how Daddy had to move to a smaller apartment and can't go on vacations anymore. Dr. Walsh's pen never stopped moving, but I saw her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. How does that make you feel, Emma? Bad. The word came out as barely a whisper. Really bad. After the session, Dr. Walsh asked to speak with me privately while Emma played in the waiting room. Mr. Patterson, what I observed today concerns me greatly. Emma is exhibiting classic signs of parentification and inappropriate guilt. She's been given adult information and asked to carry emotional responsibility that no child should bear. What's our next step? I want to see Emma twice a week for now. And I need to meet with her mother as soon as possible. Dr. Walsh closed Emma's file. I'm also going to recommend a custody evaluation. Based on what Emma shared today, there are serious questions about emotional manipulation. Will you have to report this to CPS? Not yet. But if the pattern continues or escalates, I'll have no choice. Thursday morning brought a text from Sarah that made my blood run cold. Emma told me you took her to a therapist without discussing it with me first. This is exactly the kind of unilateral decision-making that caused problems in our marriage. I've scheduled my own appointment with Dr. Walsh for Friday, I forwarded the message to Marcus immediately. His response came back within 10 minutes, document everything from tomorrow's session. Sarah's going to try to control the narrative, Friday afternoon, I waited in Dr. Walsh's parking lot for Sarah's appointment to end. I needed to see her face, to gauge how well her performance had gone. At 5:15, the office door opened and Sarah emerged, looking perfectly composed in her navy blazer and pressed slacks. She spotted my car immediately and walked over, tapping on my window with one manicured finger. David, we need to talk. I rolled down the window but didn't get out. What about? You're traumatizing Emma with all these questions about our private conversations. Dr. Walsh agrees that children can misinterpret innocent discussions. What exactly did you tell Dr. Walsh? Sarah's smile was cold and practiced. The truth. That Emma sometimes overhears adult conversations and creates her own dramatic interpretations. That you've been encouraging her to see herself as a victim instead of helping her adjust to our new family structure. My hands gripped the steering wheel. And Dr. Walsh bought that? Dr. Walsh understands that children need consistency, not mixed messages from parents who are fighting. Sarah leaned closer to the window. I also mentioned that this sudden therapy push coincided with your disappointment about the custody arrangement. She found that timing interesting. The implication hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah had painted me as the manipulative parent, using therapy to build a case rather than genuinely helping Emma. You're unbelievable. I'm protecting our daughter from being turned into a weapon in whatever midlife crisis you're having. Sarah straightened up, smoothing her blazer. Drop this therapy nonsense, David. Focus on being a good weekend dad instead of trying to change agreements we've already settled. As she walked away, I realized Sarah had just declared war using Emma's own therapist as a battlefield. She'd gotten there first, controlled the narrative, and positioned me as the unstable parent manufacturing problems. But she'd also just threatened me in Dr. Walsh's parking lot, and something told me that level of confidence meant she was scared. I started the engine, already planning my next move. If Sarah wanted to play games with Emma's therapy, she'd just handed me exactly the rope I needed. Saturday morning, I was making Emma's favorite chocolate chip pancakes when my phone rang. Dr. Walsh's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach immediately nodded. Therapists didn't typically call parents on weekends unless something was seriously wrong. Mr. Patterson, I apologize for calling on a Saturday, but I wanted to discuss yesterday's session with Emma's mother before our next appointment. I stepped into the hallway, lowering my voice so Emma wouldn't overhear from the kitchen. How did it go? That's what concerns me. Mrs. Patterson presented a very different narrative about Emma's statements. She characterized them as misunderstandings and suggested that you might be coaching Emma to make these comments. My jaw clenched. Did you believe her? What I believe isn't relevant. What matters is that I now have two completely contradictory accounts of the same situation. Dr. Walsh paused, and I could hear papers rustling. However, Mrs. Patterson said something that raised additional red flags. What kind of red flags? She insisted that Emma has never expressed guilt about the divorce in her presence, only during transitions back from your house. She suggested that Emma might be performing distress to get attention from you. I leaned against the wall, processing this. So she's claiming Emma is manipulating me? More than that. She's suggesting that Emma learned this behavior from watching you manipulate situations. Mrs. Patterson specifically mentioned that you've always been dramatic and that Emma might be mimicking that pattern. The accusation was so twisted it took my breath away. Sarah was now claiming that Emma's emotional distress was learned behavior from me, effectively making me responsible for the very trauma Sarah had inflicted. Dr. Walsh, did she mention anything about the specific comments Emma made about money, or about being unplanned? She dismissed those as normal childhood anxieties that all divorced children experience. She said Emma has always been sensitive and tends to catastrophize minor conversations. Another pause. But here's what troubles me, Mr. Patterson. When I asked for examples of these supposed misunderstandings, Mrs. Patterson became defensive. She said you were trying to build a case against her and that my questions felt like an interrogation. She actually said I was building a case. Her exact words were, David's clearly gathering ammunition for another custody fight, and I won't have my parenting psychoanalyzed because he can't accept our arrangement. I closed my eyes, realizing Sarah had just made a critical error. She'd revealed that she knew exactly why I brought Emma to therapy, which meant she also knew her own behavior was problematic enough to threaten the custody arrangement. What happens next? I want to see Emma alone this week, without either parent present. I'm also requesting permission to record our sessions going forward. Dr. Walsh's voice became more clinical. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you directly, have you discussed custody modifications with Emma, or mentioned anything about wanting to change living arrangements? Absolutely not. I've been careful not to involve her in any legal discussions. And have you asked Emma to repeat or remember specific conversations with her mother? No. When she brings these things up, I listen and try to reassure her, but I don't probe for details. Good. Because I'm going to be watching very carefully for signs of coaching from either parent. Dr. Walsh's tone softened slightly. I want you to know that regardless of what Mrs. Patterson suggested, Emma's distress is real. A child doesn't develop that level of self-blame without outside influence. After hanging up, I returned to the kitchen where Emma was carefully arranging blueberries on her pancakes in the shape of a smiley face. Who was on the phone, Daddy? Just someone from work, sweetheart. I sat down across from her, studying her face. She looked more relaxed than she had in weeks, actually eating instead of picking at her food. Daddy, do you like Dr. Walsh? The question caught me off guard. I think she's very nice. Do you like her? Emma nodded enthusiastically. She has really good crayons. And she asked me lots of questions about feelings. Her expression grew more thoughtful. Mommy asked me lots of questions about Dr. Walsh too. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. What kind of questions? Like what we talked about, and if you told me what to say. Emma took another bite of pancakes. I told her we just colored and talked about feelings. But Mommy seemed worried. Worried how? She kept asking if Dr. Walsh seemed mad at her, or if Dr. Walsh said anything about her being a bad mommy. Emma looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes. I told her Dr. Walsh didn't say anything like that, but Mommy still seemed upset. Sarah was cracking. The confident woman who confronted me in the parking lot was apparently grilling a 9-year-old for intelligence about her therapy sessions. More importantly, Sarah was worried about being perceived as a bad mother, which meant she knew her behavior was indefensible. Did Mommy say anything else about Dr. Walsh? Emma hesitated, that careful expression crossing her face again. She said sometimes therapists don't understand families like ours, and that I should remember that there are two sides to every story. Another manipulation. Sarah was already preparing Emma to distrust Dr. Walsh if the therapist didn't buy Sarah's version of events. But as I watched Emma finish her breakfast with the first genuine appetite she'd shown in weeks, I realized something important. Away from Sarah's influence, even for just a weekend, Emma was returning to herself. The guilt-ridden, anxious child who'd asked if I hated her was being replaced by the curious, cheerful girl I remembered. The contrast was stark enough that even a trained professional would notice. Sarah might have gotten the first word with Dr. Walsh, but Emma's behavior would tell the real story. And based on what I was seeing this weekend, that story was going to be impossible for Sarah to explain away. The breakthrough came during Emma's third solo session with Dr. Walsh. I was sitting in the waiting room, pretending to read a magazine while straining to hear anything through the soundproof walls, when the office door opened 20 minutes early. Emma emerged with red, puffy eyes but something different in her posture, lighter, like she'd set down a heavy backpack. Dr. Walsh followed, her expression carefully neutral but with a tension around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Mr. Patterson, could I speak with you briefly while Emma chooses a book from our library? Emma wandered to the corner bookshelf, seemingly absorbed in a picture book about elephants. Dr. Walsh gestured for me to step into the hallway. I need to ask you about something specific that Emma shared today. Dr. Walsh kept her voice low but urgent. She mentioned a conversation that happened last Tuesday night, after your scheduled phone call with her. My stomach dropped. Tuesday's call had been brief. Emma seemed distracted and kept saying she needed to help her mother with something important. What about it? According to Emma, after you hung up, her mother sat her down for what she called an important talk about loyalty and truth. Mrs. Patterson allegedly told Emma that you were trying to turn her against her own mother by asking leading questions. I asked her about her day at school and whether she'd finished her science project. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar tension headache building. That was literally the extent of our conversation. Emma said her mother explained that divorced fathers sometimes try to steal children away from their mothers by making the mothers look bad. She was told that therapists can be tricked by children who tell stories, and that she needed to be very careful about what she said to me. The hallway suddenly felt too warm. She's coaching her. It gets worse. Dr. Walsh glanced toward Emma, who was still absorbed in her book. Emma said her mother showed her articles on her phone about parental alienation and explained that this was what you were trying to do. A 9-year-old, Mr. Patterson. She made a 4th grader read about custody manipulation tactics. My hands clenched into fists. What did Emma say to that? She asked her mother if that meant she was in trouble for talking to me. Mrs. Patterson allegedly said no, but that Emma needed to remember who takes care of her every day and who would be left all alone if Emma was taken away. The words hit like physical blows. Sarah wasn't just manipulating Emma anymore, she was actively terrorizing her with the threat of abandonment. Did Emma understand what that meant? She understood enough to spend the last week afraid that talking to me honestly would somehow result in her mother being left all alone. She's been censoring herself because she thinks protecting her mother's feelings is her responsibility. I leaned against the wall, feeling dizzy. How did you get her to tell you this today? I asked her why she seemed nervous during our sessions. She broke down and said she was scared of saying the wrong thing and making Mommy sad. Dr. Walsh's professional composure cracked slightly. Mr. Patterson, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've rarely seen such systematic emotional manipulation of a child. What happens now? Now I document everything and prepare my recommendations. Her voice became clinical again. I'm recommending supervised visitation for Mrs. Patterson and immediate modification of the custody arrangement. This level of psychological manipulation constitutes emotional abuse. Will that hold up in court? With Emma's recorded statements and my professional assessment? Yes. But Mr. Patterson, I need to warn you, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. Mrs. Patterson will likely escalate when she realizes she's losing control of the narrative. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emma seems upset after therapy again. This is becoming disruptive to her routine. I think we should consider finding a different therapist who better understands our situation. I showed Dr. Walsh the message. She read it and shook her head grimly. She's already trying to remove Emma from my care. That's textbook behavior when an abusive parent realizes they're being exposed. Dr. Walsh looked back toward Emma, who had moved on to a book about sea turtles. Mr. Patterson, how quickly can your attorney file for emergency custody modification? I'll call him as soon as I get home. Do it tonight. And whatever you do, don't let Mrs. Patterson know that Emma disclosed the Tuesday conversation. If she realizes Emma is talking openly to me, she might try to remove Emma from therapy entirely or worse, escalate the psychological pressure. As we walked back toward Emma, I realized we'd crossed a point of no return. Dar. Walsh now had documented evidence of Sarah's coaching and manipulation. But Sarah still had primary custody, which meant Emma would be returning to her house in 2 hours, where she'd face potential retaliation for whatever Sarah suspected she might have said. The next 48 hours until Emma's return to my house felt like an eternity of potential damage. And Sarah, feeling cornered, was about to become more dangerous than ever. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 p.m., giving us exactly 6 days to prepare. Marcus had filed the motion Monday morning, citing ongoing emotional abuse and parental alienation tactics that pose immediate psychological harm to the minor child. Sarah's response came Tuesday via her attorney, a motion to dismiss my petition as frivolous and retaliatory, accompanied by a character assassination disguised as legal documentation. According to Sarah's filing, I was an unstable parent attempting to weaponize therapy sessions to relitigate a settled custody arrangement. But Wednesday brought something I hadn't expected, a call from Emma's school principal. Mr. Patterson, we've had an incident involving Emma that requires both parents to come in immediately, Principal Martinez said. Can you be here by 3:30? What kind of incident? Is Emma hurt? She's not physically injured, but there was an altercation during lunch recess. Emma became very distressed when another student mentioned divorce during a conversation about families. My stomach nodded. What happened exactly? According to the playground supervisor, Emma started crying and saying she'd ruined everything and that it was her fault her friend's parents might get divorced too. She became so upset that we had to call the nurse. Principal Martinez paused. Mr. Patterson, Emma asked the nurse if there was a way to give herself back so that families could be happy again. The words felt like ice water in my veins. Give herself back. She asked if adoption worked in reverse and whether she could unexist to fix things. The nurse was quite concerned. I was already grabbing my keys. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Have you contacted Sarah? Mrs. Patterson is already here. She arrived about 20 minutes ago. Of course she had. Sarah would want to control this narrative too, to spin Emma's breakdown into something that supported her version of events. When I arrived at Jefferson Elementary, I found Sarah in Principal Martinez's office, tears streaming down her face in a performance of maternal concern that would have been convincing if I didn't know better. David, thank God you're here, she said, standing to embrace me. I stepped back, avoiding contact, and she let her arms drop with a wounded expression. Emma had some kind of panic attack. The poor baby is so confused about everything. Principal Martinez gestured for us to sit. Emma is with the guidance counselor right now. Mrs. Chen wanted to speak with both of you before we bring Emma in. Where's Mrs. Chen now? I asked. She's documenting the incident for Emma's file. She should be here momentarily. Principal Martinez folded her hands on her desk. I have to ask, are there additional stressors at home that might be contributing to Emma's anxiety? This level of self-blame is unusual, even for children of divorce. Sarah jumped in before I could respond. Emma's been seeing a therapist who keeps asking her about our family situation. I think all these questions about feelings and problems are making her more anxious, not less. The therapy was recommended because Emma was already showing signs of inappropriate guilt, I said carefully. She's been carrying adult worries that no 9-year-old should have. What kind of adult worries? Principal Martinez asked. Sarah shot me a warning look, but I was done protecting her secrets. Emma has been told that our divorce was caused by her existence. She believes she's a financial burden and that everyone would be happier if she'd never been born. That's not, Sarah started. She asked me if I hate her, I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. She declined a school field trip because she didn't want to, cost more money. She's been hoarding food because she thinks I can't afford to feed her. Principal Martinez's expression darkened. Mrs. Patterson, are you aware that Emma has been expressing these concerns? Children misinterpret things, Sarah said, her voice taking on that careful, controlled tone I knew so well. Emma's always been sensitive. Sometimes she overhears adult conversations and creates her own dramatic interpretations. The office door opened, and Mrs. Chen entered carrying a thick folder. Emma's guidance counselor was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who'd worked with troubled children for decades. I've just finished speaking with Emma, Mrs. Chen said, settling into the remaining chair. I'm going to be direct, this child is exhibiting signs of severe emotional distress that go well beyond typical divorce adjustment. Sarah leaned forward. What do you mean? Emma spent 20 minutes telling me detailed stories about conversations where she was explicitly told that her birth caused her parents problems. She can quote specific phrases about being unplanned and expensive. Mrs. Chen opened her folder. She also mentioned being shown articles about something called parental alienation and being warned that her father might try to steal her away. The blood drained from Sarah's face. She's confused. Children remember things incorrectly. Mrs. Patterson, Emma provided dates, times, and specific locations for these conversations. She described your kitchen table, mentioned it happened after a phone call with her father on a Tuesday night, and recalled that you showed her something on your phone. Mrs. Chen's voice remained gentle but firm. This level of detail suggests accurate recall, not childhood fantasy. Sarah's composure finally cracked. You're all ganging up on me. David's been coaching her to say these things so he can try to take Emma away from me. Mrs. Patterson, Principal Martinez said quietly, Emma had this breakdown before Mr. Patterson arrived at school. She was already expressing these thoughts to our staff independently. The room fell silent except for Sarah's ragged breathing. I could see her realizing that her carefully constructed narrative was falling apart in real time. I want to see my daughter, Sarah said finally. Of course, Mrs. Chen replied. But first, I need to inform you both that I'm mandated to report this incident to Child Protective Services. The level of emotional distress Emma is experiencing requires professional intervention. Sarah's face went white. You're calling CPS on me? I'm reporting a child in crisis, Mrs. Chen corrected. The investigation will determine what support services Emma and your family need. As Mrs. Chen reached for her phone, I realized that everything had just changed. Tomorrow's custody hearing would no longer be about my word against Sarah's. Now there would be an official CPS case file documenting Emma's breakdown and the statements she'd made to school officials. Sarah had finally gone too far, and the system was starting to pay attention. The CPS caseworker arrived at my apartment Friday evening at 6:47 p.m., exactly 3 hours after I picked Emma up from what would be her last unsupervised weekend at Sarah's house. Emma was in her room, quietly building a Lego castle while I paced the living room, checking my phone every 30 seconds. Mr. Patterson. I'm Linda Vasquez from Child Protective Services. The woman at my door was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a messenger bag that looked like it weighed 50 pounds. I know this is difficult timing, but we need to discuss Emma's safety. I invited her in, my hands shaking as I offered coffee. Is this about what happened at school on Wednesday? Partially. Linda settled onto my couch, pulling out a tablet and a thick manila folder. We've also received additional reports since then. Dr. Walsh filed a supplementary statement yesterday, and Mrs. Chen provided detailed documentation of Emma's breakdown. My stomach clenched. Additional reports. On Thursday night, Emma called her school's crisis hotline. Linda's voice remained gentle, but her words hit like hammers. She used your ex-wife's phone at approximately 11:15 p.m. The volunteer who took the call logged it as a wellness check for a child expressing suicidal ideation. The room tilted sideways. Emma called a suicide hotline. The crisis line serves multiple functions, but yes. Emma told the volunteer that she wanted to disappear so that her parents could be happy again. When asked if she wanted to hurt herself, she said she just wanted to not exist anymore. I sank into my chair, struggling to process this. Where was Sarah when this happened? According to the call log, Emma was alone in her bedroom. Mrs. Patterson was reportedly taking a bath and had left her phone charging in Emma's room. Linda made a note on her tablet. The volunteer kept Emma on the line for 18 minutes until Mrs. Patterson returned. What did Sarah do when she found out? That's where things get concerning. Linda consulted her folder. Mrs. Patterson allegedly told Emma that the crisis line was for children with real problems and that Emma was being dramatic. She then took her phone away and told Emma that calling strangers about family business was inappropriate. My hands clenched into fists. Even when Emma had reached the point of calling a crisis line, Sarah's first instinct was to shame her rather than comfort her. The volunteer flagged the call for follow-up because Emma's language about not existing raised red flags. When they called back Friday morning to check on her, Mrs. Patterson said Emma was fine and that the call had been a misunderstanding. Linda looked up from her notes. Mr. Patterson, did Emma mention this incident when she came to stay with you? No, but she's been quieter than usual. Last night she asked if people could take back wishes and if God ever made mistakes. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar headache building. I thought she was just processing the therapy sessions. Dr. Walsh's report indicates Emma has been systematically emotionally abused through a campaign of psychological manipulation designed to make her feel responsible for adult problems. Linda's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine anger. In 15 years of casework, I've rarely seen such deliberate targeting of a child's self-worth. What happens now? Effective immediately, Emma will remain in your custody pending investigation. Mrs. Patterson will have supervised visitation only, and those visits must include a social worker present. Linda handed me a thick packet of papers. We're also mandating that Emma continue therapy with Dr. Walsh and that Mrs. Patterson undergo psychological evaluation. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by terror. How is Sarah going to react to this? That's something we need to discuss. Linda's expression grew grave. In my experience, parents who engage in this level of manipulation often escalate when they lose control. Mrs. Patterson has already called our office 6 times since this morning, alternating between demanding Emma's return and threatening legal action against everyone involved. My phone buzzed with a text notification. The message was from an unknown number, *, you've turned everyone against me, but Emma knows the truth. She'll come home where she belongs, *. I showed Linda the message. She photographed it with her tablet and made another note. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask, do you have security cameras on this property? Just a doorbell camera. Why? I'd recommend upgrading your security system immediately. And keep detailed logs of any contact from Mrs. Patterson. Linda stood, shouldering her heavy bag. I'll be checking on Emma twice weekly until this investigation concludes. The goal is keeping her safe while we determine long-term custody arrangements. As Linda left, I realized that while we'd won this battle, the war was far from over. Sarah's text suggested she wasn't accepting defeat quietly. And somewhere in Sarah's mind, Emma was still a possession to be reclaimed rather than a child to be protected. The weekend passed quietly, but Monday morning shattered any illusion of peace. I was making Emma's lunch when my phone rang with an unknown number. David, it's me. Sarah's voice was strained, different from her usual controlled tone. We need to talk. All communication needs to go through our attorneys now, Sarah. You know that. This is about Emma's well-being, not legal bullshit. I could hear traffic in the background. She was calling from her car. She left her stuffed elephant at my house. The purple one she can't sleep without. My stomach clenched. Emma had been asking about Eleanor the elephant all weekend, but I'd assumed she'd left it in her backpack. I'll have Linda coordinate pickup with you. David, please. 5 minutes. I'll leave it on your porch, I won't even ring the doorbell. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I just want to know she's okay. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Leave it in the mailbox. Don't come to the door. 20 minutes later, I watched through my window as Sarah's silver Honda pulled into my driveway. But instead of leaving the elephant and driving away, she sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes, staring at my front door. When I went to retrieve Eleanor from the mailbox, I found more than just the stuffed animal. Tucked inside the elephant's small pocket was a handwritten note, asterisk, tell Daddy I miss him too. Tell him Mommy's sorry for everything. Tell him I want to come home. Emma asterisk. The handwriting was Sarah's. My hands shook as I photographed the note with my phone. The manipulation had reached a new level. Sarah was literally putting words in Emma's mouth, creating fake messages designed to guilt me into reconsidering the custody arrangement. I immediately forwarded the photo to Linda Vasquez and Marcus Chen, then called Dr. Walsh's office. Dr. Walsh, it's David Patterson. Sarah just tried to deliver a forged note supposedly from Emma. What kind of note? Saying Emma misses me and wants to come home. But it's clearly Sarah's handwriting, and Emma's been with me all weekend. I paced my kitchen, still clutching the note. She's escalating, just like you predicted. Mr. Patterson, I need you to document everything, but more importantly, I need to prepare Emma for the possibility that her mother might try to contact her directly. Dr. Walsh's voice carried a new urgency. Has Emma mentioned wanting to call her mother? She asked yesterday if she was allowed to miss Mommy. I told her of course she was, that it's normal to miss both parents during transitions. I paused, remembering Emma's exact words. She also asked if missing someone meant you had to live with them. That suggests Sarah may have planted the idea that love equals physical proximity. It's a common manipulation tactic. I could hear Dr. Walsh typing. I'm moving Emma's appointment to today at 4 p.m. We need to address this before it becomes a larger issue. At 3:30, I was packing Emma's backpack for therapy when she made an announcement that stopped me cold. Daddy, I think I should call Mommy tonight. I kept my voice carefully neutral. What makes you think that, sweetheart? Because she's probably really sad and scared all by herself. Emma zipped up her backpack with the same careful precision she'd learned from Sarah. When I'm sad, I feel better when people call me. The logic was heartbreaking and entirely wrong. Emma was taking responsibility for Sarah's emotional state, exactly the pattern we'd been trying to break. Grown-ups have other grown-ups to talk to when they're sad. That's not your job. But what if she doesn't have anyone? Emma's lower lip trembled. What if she's all alone and it's because of me? Before I could respond, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Linda Vasquez on my porch, but she looked tense, official. Mr. Patterson, we have a problem, Linda said the moment I opened the door. Mrs. Patterson filed a complaint this morning claiming you're denying Emma access to her personal belongings and preventing mother-daughter contact. My jaw dropped. She was just here an hour ago dropping off Emma's elephant. She's also claiming that Emma called her crying last night, begging to come home. Linda stepped inside, glancing toward Emma who was pretending to read in the living room. Did Emma make any calls yesterday? No. She was with me the entire time. I showed Linda the forged note. But this morning she started talking about calling Sarah, saying she's worried about her mother being alone. Linda examined the note, her expression darkening. This is witness tampering. She's trying to create evidence of Emma's distress to support her complaint. What does this mean for the custody arrangement? It means we're dealing with someone who's willing to forge evidence and manipulate official investigations. Linda lowered her voice. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask, do you have any reason to believe Mrs. Patterson might try to take Emma without permission? The question sent ice through my veins. You think she'd kidnap her own daughter? I think we're dealing with someone whose grip on reality is slipping. The forged note, the false complaints, the escalating contact attempts, it's classic behavior for a parent who's losing control. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number, asterisk Emma belongs with her mother. This isn't over, asterisk. Linda photographed the message, then made a call I couldn't quite hear. When she hung up, her expression was grim. Mr. Patterson, we're upgrading Emma's case to high risk. And I'm recommending you keep Emma home from school tomorrow until we can assess the threat level. The word threat hung in the air like smoke. Sarah had crossed from emotional manipulation into something darker, and Emma was caught in the middle of whatever came next. Tuesday morning brought the sound I'd been dreading, my doorbell ringing at 6:47 a.m., followed immediately by aggressive knocking. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing on my porch, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Mr. Patterson. We need to speak with you about a welfare check request. I opened the door, my heart hammering. What kind of welfare check? The older officer, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, consulted her notepad. We received a call at 6:15 a.m. from a Sarah Patterson, claiming her 9-year-old daughter has been missing since Sunday and that you've refused to let her see the child. My mouth fell open. That's completely false. Emma is here under a CPS custody order. Sarah has supervised visitation only. Ma'am, we're going to need to verify the child's well-being and see documentation of this custody arrangement, the younger officer said, his hand resting casually on his radio. I invited them in, my mind racing. Emma was still asleep upstairs, and I desperately wanted to keep her from waking up to police officers in our living room. I quickly pulled up Linda Vasquez's contact information and the CPS paperwork while the officers waited. Officers, I need to call the caseworker immediately. Mrs. Patterson has been escalating her behavior since losing custody. The female officer's expression softened slightly as she reviewed the CPS documentation. Mr. Patterson, this appears legitimate, but we still need to do a visual wellness check on the child. It's standard protocol. Emma, I called softly up the stairs. Sweetheart, can you come down for a minute? Emma appeared at the top of the stairs in her purple pajamas, rubbing her eyes. When she saw the police officers, her face went white and she froze on the bottom step. Am I in trouble? She whispered. No, baby, you're not in trouble at all, I said, moving to put my arm around her. These officers just needed to make sure you're okay. The older officer knelt down to Emma's eye level. Hi there, Emma. I'm Officer Martinez. Your mom was worried about you and asked us to check that you're safe and happy. Emma's shoulders tensed at the mention of her mother. Is Mommy okay? Did something happen to her? Your mom is fine, Officer Martinez said gently. She just misses you. Can you tell me if your dad is taking good care of you? Emma nodded vigorously. Daddy makes really good pancakes. And we're reading a chapter book together. She paused, glancing between the officers with that careful expression I'd learned to dread. Is Mommy mad that I'm staying here? The question hung in the air, loaded with the guilt Sarah had systematically installed in Emma's psyche. Even now, faced with police officers, Emma's first concern was whether she'd somehow caused her mother distress. Officer Martinez exchanged a look with her partner. Emma, sometimes families have to live in different places for a while, but that's not because of anything you did. Okay. After the officers left, confirming that Emma was safe and the custody arrangement was legitimate, I immediately called Linda Vasquez. Her phone went straight to voicemail, but she called back within 10 minutes. David, I know about the police call. Sarah contacted them claiming you'd kidnapped Emma. Linda's voice was tight with frustration. She's also filed complaints with the school district, claiming Emma is being kept from attending classes against her will. Emma's missed one day of school on your recommendation. I know, but Sarah is spinning that into evidence of educational neglect. She's systematically trying to build a case that you're the unstable parent. Linda paused, and I heard papers shuffling. David, there's something else. Sarah's attorney filed an emergency motion yesterday claiming that CPS overstepped their authority and demanding immediate return of custody. My stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can try. Judge Morrison is hearing the motion Thursday at 10 a.m. Linda's voice became more urgent. But here's what really concerns me. Sarah also filed a missing person report with the county sheriff's department, claiming Emma disappeared from school and hasn't been seen since. That's insane. Emma hasn't been missing. She's been exactly where the court ordered her to be. I know that, and you know that, but Sarah is creating an official paper trail that makes her look like a frantic mother and you look like someone who's hiding a child. Linda sighed heavily. David, I've seen this pattern before. Sarah is building towards something bigger, either a claim that you're an unfit parent, or worse, an attempt to take Emma and disappear. The word sent ice through my veins. You think she'd run with Emma? I think she's someone who views Emma as property rather than a person. When people lose control of their property, they sometimes take drastic measures to reclaim it. As I hung up the phone, Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas but now clutching Eleanor the elephant. Daddy, why did Mommy send police officers to check on me? The question was asked with that same careful tone Emma used when navigating adult emotions she didn't understand but knew were dangerous. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're worried, I said, pulling her into a hug. The important thing is that you're safe. But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. Sarah's behavior was escalating rapidly, and Thursday's emergency hearing would determine whether Emma stayed protected or was returned to the woman who'd spent months convincing her she was unwanted. The stakes had never been higher, and Sarah showed no signs of backing down. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of everything hanging in the balance. The emergency hearing was set for 10 a.m., and I'd barely slept, running through every possible scenario in my head. At 7:30 a.m., while Emma was eating cereal and watching cartoons, Marcus called with news that made my blood run cold. David, Sarah's attorney just submitted additional evidence to the court. They have a recording. I stepped into the hallway, lowering my voice. What kind of recording? Audio of Emma allegedly crying and asking to go home to Mommy. It was supposedly recorded Tuesday night during an unauthorized phone call. Marcus paused, and I could hear papers rustling. The problem is, the timestamp shows it was recorded at 9:47 p.m., which would have been after Emma's bedtime at your house. My mind raced. Marcus, Emma was asleep by 8:30 Tuesday night. I checked on her twice, once at 9:15 and again at 10 o'clock. She never left her room, never made any calls. Then this recording is fabricated, but we have to prove it. Can anyone verify Emma's whereabouts Tuesday evening? I thought frantically. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, came by at 9:30 to drop off a package that was delivered to her by mistake. She saw Emma sleeping on the couch during a movie. I even mentioned to her that Emma had fallen asleep early. Get me her contact information immediately. We need her testimony before the hearing. At 8:45 a.m., I was putting Emma's backpack together for her day with Linda's supervision when she made an observation that stopped me cold. Daddy, I had a weird dream last night about talking to Mommy on the phone. I knelt down to her level. What kind of dream, sweetheart? I dreamed Mommy called and I was crying and telling her I wanted to come home. But in the dream, I felt really sad and scared, not like how I really feel. Emma's brow furrowed. It was like watching a movie of myself, but the movie me was saying things I don't think. My hands trembled as I zipped her backpack. Sarah hadn't just fabricated a recording, she'd somehow used existing audio of Emma crying, possibly from their last phone conversation, and spliced it with scripted dialogue. Emma, do you remember the last time you talked to Mommy on the phone? Sunday night before bed. She asked me lots of questions about whether I was happy here, and if I missed my old room. Emma's voice became smaller. She kept asking the same questions over and over, even when I answered. It made me cry because she seemed really sad. That was it. Sarah had recorded their legitimate Sunday conversation, capturing Emma's tears, then manipulated the audio to create fake evidence of distress at my house. At 9:30 a.m., Linda arrived to collect Emma for supervised care during the hearing. As Emma hugged me goodbye, she whispered something that nearly broke my heart. Daddy, if the judge says I have to go back to Mommy's house, will you still love me? Emma, I will love you no matter what happens, no matter where you live. That will never, ever change. I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Remember what we talked about, sometimes grown-ups have to make decisions, but none of this is your fault or your choice. As Linda's car pulled away with Emma looking back through the rear window, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *see you in court, David. Emma's coming home where she belongs, *. Marcus picked me up at 9:45, his expression grim. I've got Mrs. Chen's statement, and I've been in touch with an audio forensics expert who can analyze the recording if needed. But David, I need to prepare you, Judge Morrison doesn't like parents who weaponize CPS, and Sarah's attorney is good at playing the victim. As we drove to the courthouse, I realized that the next 2 hours would determine everything. Either the evidence would speak for itself, or Sarah's manipulation would succeed in convincing a judge that I was the problem. Emma's future hung in the balance, and Sarah was betting everything on one final, devastating lie. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and sickly. Judge Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that she peered over when reviewing documents. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, Richard Blackwood, a man known for aggressive family law tactics. She dressed conservatively in a navy suit, playing the role of concerned mother to perfection. At exactly 10:03 a.m., Judge Morrison called the session to order. We're here for an emergency motion filed by Mrs. Sarah Patterson requesting immediate return of custody for the minor child Emma Patterson. Mr. Blackwood, present your case. Blackwood stood, his silver hair gleaming under the courthouse lights. Your Honor, my client is a devoted mother who has been systematically separated from her 9-year-old daughter through false allegations and misuse of child protective services. The evidence will show that Mr. Patterson has manipulated both his daughter and the system to gain an unfair advantage in what should be a simple custody dispute. He walked to his table and retrieved the tablet. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, an audio recording made Tuesday evening at 9:47 p.m., in which Emma Patterson can be heard crying and begging to return to her mother's care. My stomach lurched as Blackwood played the recording. Emma's voice filled the courtroom, tearful and desperate. Mommy, I want to come home. I miss you so much. Daddy's house is okay, but it's not the same. Please come get me. The audio was devastating, Emma's sobs sounding genuine and heartbroken. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, and I saw Judge Morrison's expression soften slightly. This recording was made during an unauthorized phone call initiated by the child herself, Blackwood continued. Emma used her father's phone to call her mother, crying and expressing distress about her current living situation. Mr. Patterson not only failed to report this call but actively concealed it from CPS. Marcus stood immediately. Objection, Your Honor. That recording is fabricated evidence. My client has witnesses who can verify that Emma was asleep at the alleged time of this call. I'll hear your evidence, Mr. Chen, but the court will also require authentication of this recording, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Blackwood, continue. Blackwood smiled coldly. Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson has also documented a pattern of concerning behavior since Mr. Patterson gained custody. Emma has missed school days, been denied access to her personal belongings, and been prevented from normal contact with her mother. He held up a thick folder. We have police reports, school documentation, and witness statements supporting these claims. My heart sank. Sarah had turned every protective measure into evidence against me. Missing one day of school became educational neglect. The delayed return of Emma's elephant became denial of belongings. The supervised visitation became prohibited contact. Furthermore, Blackwood continued, Mrs. Patterson has discovered that Mr. Patterson has been coaching the child to make false allegations. Emma herself has admitted to creating stories about conversations that never happened. This was news to me, and I saw Marcus tense beside me. When had Emma supposedly made these admissions? Your Honor, Marcus interjected, we'd like to cross-examine Mrs. Patterson about these alleged admissions. My client has substantial evidence that she has been systematically manipulating their daughter through emotional abuse. Judge Morrison held up her hand. Mr. Chen, you'll have your opportunity. Mr. Blackwood, I'm particularly concerned about this audio recording. The timestamp places it well after a child's typical bedtime. Can you explain the circumstances? Your Honor, Emma was reportedly unable to sleep due to distress about her living situation. She waited until her father was asleep before making the call. Blackwood consulted his notes. This demonstrates both the child's desperation to contact her mother and Mr. Patterson's failure to recognize his daughter's emotional needs. As Blackwood spoke, my phone vibrated with a text from Linda Vasquez, * audio expert confirms recording is spliced from 2 different sources. Timestamps don't match background noise patterns. Evidence is fabricated, *. I quickly showed the message to Marcus, who stood again. Your Honor, we have preliminary findings from an audio forensics expert indicating that this recording has been digitally manipulated. We request an immediate recess to present this evidence. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose sharply. Mr. Blackwood, are you presenting falsified evidence to this court? Absolutely not, Your Honor. Mrs. Patterson recorded this call in real time and provided it to our office unchanged. Then you won't object to expert analysis before we proceed? For the first time, Blackwood looked uncertain. Your Honor, this is clearly a delay tactic designed to. Mr. Blackwood, falsified evidence is a serious accusation. We'll recess for 2 hours while both parties arrange for independent audio analysis. Judge Morrison's voice carried a warning. If evidence has been tampered with, this court will take appropriate action. As the bailiff announced recess, I caught sight of Sarah's face. The mask of concerned motherhood had slipped, replaced by something calculating and cold. She wasn't giving up. She was recalculating. The 2-hour recess felt like an eternity. Marcus and I sat in a small conference room adjacent to the courthouse while our audio expert, Dr. Patricia Ng, worked her magic on Sarah's supposedly damning evidence. At 11:47 a.m., she emerged from her makeshift lab with findings that changed everything. The recording is definitely fabricated, Dr. Ng announced, pulling up waveform patterns on her laptop. The background audio shows 2 distinct environments. The crying portions were recorded in a room with hardwood floors and minimal furniture, consistent with a bedroom. But the dialogue portions show carpet and soft furnishings, more like a living room. Marcus leaned forward. Can you prove when each section was recorded? Better than that. Dr. Ng highlighted specific sections of the audio. The emotional responses, Emma's crying and distressed breathing, show natural speech patterns. But the actual words, I want to come home and please come get me, show digital compression artifacts consistent with text-to-speech software that's been processed to match the child's voice. My blood ran cold. You're saying Sarah created fake dialogue using Emma's voice? Partially. She recorded Emma crying during what was probably a legitimate emotional moment, then used voice synthesis technology to create the specific phrases she needed. Dr. Ng pulled up a second screen. There are at least 6 splice points where natural audio transitions to artificial speech. It's sophisticated, but detectable. At 12:15 p.m., we reconvened in the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked decidedly less patient than before, and Sarah's confident demeanor had cracked noticeably. Blackwood kept glancing at his client with barely concealed concern. Dr. Ng, Judge Morrison said after the expert was sworn in, please explain your findings to the court. Dr. Ng's testimony was methodical and damning. She walked the judge through each splice point, demonstrating how Sarah had manipulated genuine recordings of Emma's distress to create false evidence. When she played the separated audio tracks, Emma's real tears versus the artificially generated dialogue, the difference was unmistakable. Your Honor, Dr. Ng concluded, this recording represents deliberate fabrication of evidence. The person who created it had access to multiple recordings of the child and sophisticated audio editing software. Judge Morrison's expression had grown increasingly stern throughout the testimony. She turned to Blackwood with barely controlled anger. Mr. Blackwood, your client has presented falsified evidence to this court. How do you explain this? Blackwood was visibly sweating now. Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson provided this recording in good faith. She had no knowledge of any manipulation. Mrs. Patterson, Judge Morrison said sharply, approached the bench. Sarah stood on unsteady legs, her face pale but defiant. Your Honor, I would never manipulate evidence. David must have somehow. Mrs. Patterson, the audio analysis shows that this recording was created using source material that could only have come from your phone. Are you claiming Mr. Patterson had access to your private recordings of your daughter? Sarah's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. The logical trap was perfect. Either she'd fabricated the evidence herself, or she'd given David access to her phone recordings, which would contradict her claims about prohibited contact. There must be some mistake, Sarah finally stammered. Mrs. Patterson, presenting falsified evidence is contempt of court and potential perjury. But more concerning to me is what this suggests about your treatment of your daughter. Judge Morrison's voice carried real anger now. You recorded a child's genuine emotional distress and then manipulated it to serve your legal strategy. This demonstrates a disturbing willingness to exploit your own daughter's pain. Marcus stood. Your Honor, if I may present additional evidence about Mrs. Patterson's pattern of manipulation. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus methodically presented the documentation we gathered, Emma's statements to Dr. Walsh, the crisis hotline call, the forged note in Eleanor's pocket, the fake missing person reports. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of a woman systematically destroying her daughter's mental health to win a custody battle. When Linda Vasquez took the stand to describe Emma's breakdown at school and the subsequent CPS investigation, Sarah's last shreds of credibility evaporated. Linda's clinical recitation of Emma's exact words, asking how to give herself back and wanting to unexist, left the courtroom in stunned silence. At 2:43 p.m., Judge Morrison announced her decision. Mrs. Patterson, your behavior demonstrates a pattern of emotional abuse that poses immediate danger to your daughter's psychological well-being. Your willingness to fabricate evidence shows a fundamental disregard for both this court's authority and your child's welfare. Sarah's face crumpled as the judge continued. Custody will remain with Mr. Patterson indefinitely. Mrs. Patterson's visitation rights are suspended pending completion of a psychological evaluation and anger management counseling. This court will also be referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential perjury charges. As the bailiff explained the next steps, Sarah turned to look at me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't over, David, she hissed as Blackwood tried to restrain her. Emma is my daughter. She belongs with me. But it was over. The system had finally seen through Sarah's manipulations, and Emma was safe. At least, I hoped she was safe. Because the look in Sarah's eyes as she left that courtroom suggested she wasn't ready to accept defeat, court order or no court order. The first week after the court victory felt like holding my breath underwater. Emma seemed lighter, more like her old self, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's silence was temporary rather than acceptance. She hadn't attempted contact since Thursday's hearing, which should have been reassuring but somehow felt more ominous than her previous harassment. On Tuesday evening at 6:23 p.m., everything changed. I was helping Emma with her math homework when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Patterson. This is Detective Maria Santos with the County Sheriff's Department. We need to speak with you immediately about Sarah Patterson. My stomach dropped. What's happened? Sir, we'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come to the station tonight? And you'll need to arrange supervision for Emma. This conversation needs to happen without the child present. 20 minutes later, Linda Vasquez arrived to stay with Emma while I drove to the sheriff's station, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Detective Santos met me in a small conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. Mr. Patterson, we arrested Sarah Patterson this morning on charges of cyberstalking and harassment. Detective Santos opened a thick file folder. She's been conducting what we can only describe as a surveillance campaign against you and your daughter. What kind of surveillance? She installed tracking software on Emma's backpack, placed a GPS device under your car, and has been photographing your house from various locations for the past 2 weeks. Santos showed me a stack of photos, images of Emma playing in our yard, me carrying groceries, even pictures taken through our windows at night. We found over 300 photographs in her apartment, along with detailed logs of your daily routines. My hands shook as I flipped through the images. Some were taken from across the street, others from what must have been Sarah hiding in neighbors' yards. One particularly disturbing photo showed Emma sleeping, apparently taken through her bedroom window. How did you discover this? Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called us yesterday after catching someone in her backyard taking pictures of your house at 11:30 p.m. When patrol officers responded, Mrs. Patterson fled but left behind a camera bag containing professional surveillance equipment. Detective Santos pulled out a tablet showing Sarah's arrest photo. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic mixed with rage. Mr. Patterson, we also found something else in her apartment that concerns us. Santos hesitated, choosing her words carefully. She had created what appears to be a detailed plan for taking Emma without permission. Maps of your daughter's school, schedules of your work routine, even information about flights to non-extradition countries. The room suddenly felt too small. You think she was planning to kidnap Emma? The evidence suggests she was preparing for that possibility. We found airline websites bookmarked on her computer, searches for international travel with minors, and research about countries that don't honor U.S. custody orders. Santos leaned forward. There's more. She had been in contact with a private investigator who specializes in family reunification services, essentially professional child abduction. I struggled to process this information. The woman who'd once been my wife, Emma's mother, had been planning to steal our daughter and disappear to another country. What happens now? Mrs. Patterson is being held on $250,000 bail. The district attorney is considering additional charges including attempted kidnapping and violation of custody orders. Santos closed the file. But Mr. Patterson, we need to discuss security measures for you and Emma. Even in custody, Mrs. Patterson has been making statements about Emma being stolen from her and needing to bring her home. What kind of statements? She's convinced that you and the court system have conspired against her. She believes Emma is being held against her will and that any action she takes to rescue her daughter would be justified. Santos's expression grew grave. In my experience, parents who reach this level of delusion can be extremely dangerous, even from jail. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Walsh. David, I just heard about Sarah's arrest. How is Emma handling this? She doesn't know yet. I'm not sure how to tell her that her mother was essentially stalking us. We need to address this carefully in therapy. Emma's already struggling with feeling responsible for adult problems. Learning that her mother was arrested could trigger massive guilt responses. Dr. Walsh paused. But David, there's something else. Sarah's attorney contacted me today requesting Emma's therapy records for a competency hearing. A competency hearing? Sarah is apparently claiming diminished capacity due to emotional distress from losing custody. Her legal team wants to argue that her recent behavior was the result of mental breakdown rather than criminal intent. I pulled into my driveway, staring at the house that no longer felt safe. Sarah might be in jail, but she was still finding ways to manipulate the system, still treating Emma like property to be reclaimed rather than a child to be protected. And somewhere in a jail cell 20 miles away, she was planning her next move. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning that felt like a new beginning, I stood in the courthouse lobby holding Emma's hand as we waited for the final hearing. She'd grown 2 inches since Sarah's arrest and had started sleeping through the night again without nightmares. The anxious, guilt-ridden child who'd asked if I hated her was gone, replaced by a confident 9-year-old who'd recently joined her school's drama club and declared she wanted to be a marine biologist. Daddy, will Mommy be there today? Emma asked, adjusting her purple dress, the one she'd chosen herself because it was her lucky color. Yes, sweetheart. But remember what Dr. Walsh told you, this is just the grown-ups finishing up the paperwork to make sure you stay safe. Sarah's psychological evaluation had revealed what we'd all suspected, narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial tendencies. The private investigator she'd hired turned out to be an FBI informant tracking international child abduction rings. Her detailed kidnapping plan, combined with the falsified evidence and surveillance campaign, had resulted in a plea agreement, 2 years in minimum security prison, 5 years probation, and permanent termination of parental rights. Marcus appeared from the elevator, carrying a briefcase and wearing the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. David, Emma, ready to make this official. At 10:15 a.m., Judge Morrison called the proceeding to order. Sarah sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by 2 court officers. She'd lost weight in custody, her face gaunt and hollow, but when she saw Emma, her eyes filled with tears. Mommy looks sad, Emma whispered to me. Sometimes grown-ups are sad about choices they made, I replied softly. But that's not your responsibility to fix. The hearing lasted exactly 12 minutes. Sarah's attorney read a prepared statement accepting termination of parental rights in exchange for the reduced sentence. When Judge Morrison asked if Sarah had anything to say, she stood slowly. I love Emma, she said, her voice cracking. Everything I did was because I love her. Emma squeezed my hand tighter but didn't respond. We'd spent months in therapy working through the difference between love and possession, between protecting and controlling. Emma understood now that real love meant wanting someone to be happy and safe, even if that meant letting them go. Mrs. Patterson, Judge Morrison said firmly, love doesn't justify manipulation, fraud, or attempted kidnapping. Your parental rights are hereby permanently terminated. You are prohibited from any contact with a minor child, directly or indirectly, for the remainder of her childhood. As the bailiff led Sarah away, she turned back once. For just a moment, I saw not the manipulative woman who terrorized our daughter, but someone broken and lost. Then the moment passed, and she was gone. Outside the courthouse, Emma looked up at me with those wise, dark eyes that had seen too much but remained hopeful. Daddy, does this mean I don't have to worry about making anyone sad anymore? I knelt down to her level, surrounded by the October sunshine and the promise of normal childhood ahead. Emma, the only person you're responsible for is yourself. Your job is to be a kid, to learn and play and grow up happy. All the grown-up worries are finished now. She nodded solemnly, then brightened. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? That place with the cookie dough flavors? Absolutely, I said, taking her hand as we walked toward our car. We have a lot to celebrate. For the first time in over a year, Emma skipped instead of walked, her purple dress swirling around her knees as she chattered about her upcoming school play. The careful, guilty child who'd blamed herself for her parents' divorce was finally free to just be 9 years old. And I was finally free to just be her dad.